Appalachia, a word that evokes a whole passel of reaction. Everything from the beauty of a mountaintop to trailer parks, drugs, and about everything in between. The Appalachian Mountains are indeed the oldest mountains in the world. They once towered 30,000 feet into the air. They stretch from eastern Canada through 14 states all the way to Louisiana. And the folks that live in these mountains have faced an unending number of tragic and just plain odd happenings that cry out for the telling. Hello, I'm Larry Benton. I was born and raised in these very mountains, a family who themselves were born, raised, and lived for generations in the heart of the Appalachian Mountains. Come with me and we'll take a look at some of the unending stories that came from within my beloved mountains, and we'll take a look through the eyes of an Appalachian at some outside the area as well. Welcome to Season 5 of Appalachian Murder, Mystery, and Legend. Howdy, my good friends. I hope you're doing well as I am today. Now, everybody that's listened here know that I've been living in the state of Indiana for a spell. Like I've told you folks for a while now, if you ain't never had the company you work for just crumble into dust right when you're in the middle of working for them, then you ain't fully tasted what life can bring to the table and serve up like one of them biscuit and gravy suppers Mama used to make when I was a little feller. Especially when that's followed up by the fact that the economy was in the toilet and McDonald's wasn't even hiring, so I couldn't even go flip a burger. To make a long story short, we wound up in Indiana where the lovely Mrs. Bentley was born and raised, and you know me, I can't just move somewhere and live there without digging into some history. And trust me, there's plenty of it to go around here to find. I found today's story a while back and have been putting it on together, for an episode, when all of a sudden I see a story come up about the filthy low-life scum of the earth piece of dog squeeze that perpetrated the crime on the innocent victim. Now, don't get me wrong, after everything I've learned about this case, it was actually some decent news on the justice front. So we'll get into all that. So come on in and have a sit down and let me tell you all about what Mr. Twit Wiffle's fixing to do here in a couple of weeks. Now, when you roll into a whole new town in Indiana like I did a while back, fresh off the side of a mountain in southwest Virginia where you've been since you was born, you feel about as apt as a tick fresh off a hound dog's ear. But you soon take up with good-hearted folks, and I can tell you now that Hoosier hospitality is top-notch. There's some real good folks about southern Indiana, and the rolling foothills, well, they at least make me feel a little bit at home. Now, the good folks of Spencer County, which is about 10 minutes west of where I am, they experienced something horrible that happened back in July 11th, 2001. It was in the town of Dale, which reminds me so much of the little town of Dublin back in Virginia. Now, the evening of July 10th had ended, like it always did, in early summer for the family of Roger and Julie Payne and their 3 children, Melissa, Stacy, and Brian. Julie and Stacy, who was age 15, had showed up like all mothers and sisters do to support Melissa, who was 14, as she played in her softball game. They got back home around 10 o'clock that night. Stacy and Melissa got all readied up and hit the hay in their bedroom that they shared. Now, Stacy was an honor roll student, cheerleader, a member of the high school council, and member of the high school band at Heritage Hill High School. Now, she wasn't just doing all that, like it wouldn't have already worn me plumb out. She worked at Jenks Pizza there in Dale, too. And the pizza's still there, and it's still good. Now, she was a member of the youth group at St. Joseph's Catholic Church, and her family described her as a compassionate person who always put the needs of others before her own. On the morning of July 11th, 2001, Roger and Brian woke up early, left for work. Roger worked at the Alcoa aluminum factory over in Warwick County, which was a hop, skip, and a jump down the road from his home. I couldn't find what son Brian did, but it sounds a whole lot like he worked there too, or else he wouldn't be likely riding with his pops. Now, that was and still is a really good job to have around these parts. Mom Julie had to go to work that morning too, and try as I might, I couldn't find anything on what Julie did for a living. After Roger and Brian left, Julie did what all moms do, and that was to go check on Stacy and Melissa through the bedroom door. Now, she saw them laying there asleep in the bedroom floor, which is normal for them in the summer. Heck, I remember being pretty normal for us just about all year round. Now, once she checked on their babies, Julie headed off to work. Along about 8:30, Melissa woke up, and Stacy got up about 30 minutes behind. When Melissa woke up, she went on downstairs, watched a little TV, probably like most of us at that age, probably had her own favorite program to watch. Then she went on into the internet to chat with a few friends using the old Yahoo Messenger. Then, at about 10 o'clock, Melissa went outside to feed, water, and play with their miniature schnauzer. Afterward, Melissa came back in, watched a little more TV. Then at about 12 o'clock, she decided she's going to lay down and take her a nap. Probably still tired from playing baseball, if I had to guess. Or softball, I'm sorry. Stacy, well, she had been on the telephone, on the internet, and was watching TV too that morning. Stacy was scheduled to go into work at Jinx later that day. Now then, while Melissa was napping, a piece of human dog squeeze named Roy Ward crawled up out of the sewer, acting like he was looking for a lost dog. As far as I can tell, nobody knows for sure, but somehow the pitiful excuse for existence worked his way into the house. Melissa woke up to the sound of Stacy screaming. When she heard the screaming, Melissa ran out of the bedroom to the top of the stairs. Where she looked down, she saw the most horrific thing that anybody should ever have to see, let alone see it happening to a family member right there in their own house. Now, she saw Stacy on the floor with a man on top of her. Stacy was screaming while her and the man were fighting. The man was holding Stacy down and punching her. Melissa did the only thing she could do, and that was run to her parents' room and call 911. Now, I gotta say that Melissa was wise beyond her years, because there really wasn't anything else that she could have done. Now, Stacy was still screaming while Melissa was on the telephone with the 911 operator. She could hear him. Now, the whole time she was screaming, Stacy was pleading with the man to please stop. Of course, being dumber than a sack full of hammers, he just kept going and telling her, "You better be quiet." Police rolled up within 10 minutes of Melissa's phone call. Dale Town Marshal, Matt Keller, got there first. He saw a black Pontiac Bonneville with Perry County license plates, Perry County where I live, which is next to Spencer, just east, and it was parked at the house. Marshal Keller then entered the house and saw the moron Ward standing 5-6 feet inside the door with a closed blade knife in his hand and sweating like he just run a marathon. The idiot dropped the knife after he was commanded a couple of times to do so, then went to the floor after Marshal Keller's second command to do so. That meant that the genius was thinking about trying something, but figured that since there was a likelihood that Marshal Keller had a gun pointed at his head, it was better to just comply. Now, the garbage was then handcuffed while he was flopped out on the ground. The Marshal Keller radioed the station that had one in custody. He hadn't got in to see what else was up yet, so he then stepped over the trash and took a couple of steps inside, where he saw Stacy laying in a huge pool of blood in the kitchen area. Now, the poor girl was on the floor, moving her arms and legs and trying to speak. Marshal Keller, of course, could see that she was badly injured in at least her abdomen and throat. Now, he positioned himself where he could keep an eye on the handcuffed idiot and try to help Stacy while he waited for an ambulance. Deputy Sheriff Dale Kessinger got out there about the same time as the EMS crew did. That's when the two officers cleared the way for them to put the Nimrod in Marshal Keller's car. Of course, before they do that, they always search whoever they're chunking in before they chunk them in. When they did, they found a white piece of twine with a red stain stuffed in the deviant's pocket. The twine had blonde hair wrapped up in it. Meanwhile, the 911 operator, Dara Harris, had kept Melissa on the telephone as Marshal Keller made entry into the house. Operator Harris said she could hear Stacy screaming in the background while she talked to Melissa. Operator Harris told Melissa that a man had been apprehended and that an officer was coming up the steps to assist her. Detective Randy Cuttrell then took Melissa out of the house and placed her into the police car for safety. Melissa didn't see Stacy or the bag of monkey nuts Ward as she was taken out of the house, but she did see a black car in the driveway that she didn't know who it belonged to. When the emergency medical technician, Mary Stout, got to Stacy at the scene to render emergency assistance, Stacy first threw her arms at him several times like she was trying to fight him off. And at the same time, she was moving her legs like she was trying to crawl away. You see, when somebody been attacked and they're gone into fight mode, it breaks your heart. And EMT Stout explained that Stacy said that he was there to help, and Mr. Stout did his best to place Stacy's abdominal organs that had been exposed during the attack back into her body by using the wound dressing. Now, while Mr. Stout attended to Stacy, she would open her eyes every now and then and cried several times as well. Stacy moaned with pain as the EMTs moved her. They probably put her on what's known as a backboard to give support and help immobilize her neck and back, and in cases of spinal injury. Now, Stacy was able to nod in response to questions from Mr. Stout. From there, Stacy was placed in an ambulance. Mr. Stout's partner called for an emergency ambulance transport because EMTs determined, that the local hospital just didn't have the trauma support needed to deal with that type of severe wound and that had been inflicted there on Stacy. EMTs tried to place a nasal airway into Stacy, but it caused her to gag. That was actually a good thing to see because as long as that was still happening, she was still with them. They then applied a non-breather mask to Stacy, a non-rebreather mask, and that's what we call high-flow oxygen. But the idea being that, to get a good high flow of oxygen into the patient to slow or even maybe reverse any further damage. That was tricky because the piece of human waste had cut Stacy's throat and trachea open. So the EMTs had to wrap a plastic IV bag wrapper around Stacy's neck to enable her to breathe. And that was a brilliant move on their part, actually. Stacy stayed conscious through all of that. And the EMTs were with Stacy for 9 minutes at the house and then another 10 minutes to transport her to the hospital. When she arrived at St. Joseph's Hospital, Stacy went to emergency doctor Rodney Edwards. Stacy was prepared for transportation by life flight helicopter to Louisville Hospital, which is a level 1 trauma center. Stacy remained at St. Joseph's for about 46 minutes before being airlifted to the University of Louisville Hospital. But, the last time I checked, it was still one of the top trauma centers in the country and has been for a good number of years. Stacy's small intestines were outside the abdominal cavity, and she was laying on her backboard. Dr. Edwards could see that the opening in her abdomen was all the way from one side to the other. Upon closer inspection, it was revealed that the wound to Stacy's abdomen was so severe that in her waist that it only left about 5 inches of her midsection undamaged. The backbone was exposed by the wound, which indicated to Dr. Edwards that there had been multiple attempts to cut through Stacy's spine. She had a large gaping wound across her neck, too, that revealed the back wall of her windpipe and an incision across her left hand where she tried to stop the knife that exposed the bone in her hand. While Stacy was being transported at the emergency room, a nurse instructed her to squeeze her hand to see if she understood, and Stacy did that. After Stacy arrived at the U of L hospital, she was transported to the major resuscitation room where medical personnel worked for hours to save her life. I know from what I've seen while running rescue calls that people can survive some of the most awful things that you could even imagine, and then sometimes it looks like when they might be all right, they don't make it. Anybody that worked in emergency medicine, from the EMT all the way up to doctors, will tell you that there's a higher power at work. God determines the outcome no matter what the injury and no matter what the treatment. This is the part that just broke my heart, because after all she'd been through that day, and despite everything the doctors could do, Stacy died at 5:20 that evening which was about 5 hours after the attack. Now, obviously, the coward Ward was dragged downtown, chucked in jail, and charged with capital murder. Now, the big problem that ices the cake for folks around these parts ain't just the fact that come 2002, the piece of human waste was found guilty and sentenced to be put down like a rabid dog. It's the fact that he's still sitting on death row today, sucking wind that he don't deserve some 25 years later. How's it possible? That's because the sorry excuse for existence appealed his conviction, saying that he was denied a change of venue. Okay, maybe I'll give him that one. So did the court, when it reversed his conviction and remanded him for a new trial, which took place in Vanderburgh County in 2004, which is about an hour west where I live now. That's down in the Evansville area. Now, that time the deviant pled guilty to all charges. I reckon the moron thought that by throwing himself on the mercy of the court would actually have mercy on him. His lawyers presented a Crimea River type defense against the death penalty, where they whined about the hard life piece of dog squeeze had. Apparently, he didn't realize that he was the very reason for the existence of the death penalty, and the jury found, or just didn't see what having a hard life had to do with deciding to outrage and murder a young girl for nothing more than just being at home and living her life. So, they again recommended the death sentence, and the court obliged by passing the sentence. Of course, it was automatically appealed again, and this time the court affirmed his conviction and sentence. Then around 2012, the dirtbag petitioned the court for post-conviction relief. Now that took a pair, but the post-conviction court denied his relief based on the fact that the trash needed to be taken out. That was appealed, and the appeal was denied in the court and set a December 11th, 2012 execution date. So folks thought that there was finally going to be some justice handed down. But on December 4th, 2012, the U.S. District Court for the Southern District of Indiana stayed the execution date after the Twit Wiffle petitioned for federal habeas relief. But the district court denied that petition and dismissed the action with prejudice. That means you can't bring it up again. Shut your mouth. That's the court's way, of stomping it completely out. Now, the Seventh Circuit affirmed that denial, and then the U.S. Supreme Court denied to even listen to any more of the crap after that. Finally, after sitting there for 12 more years, the news that I mentioned earlier came out. The Indiana Supreme Court set an execution date of October 10th, 2025 for the garbage. Of course, he did one of them leave to file a successive petition for post-conviction relief all over again. In other words, he thinks he's got some new kind of evidence that could keep him alive. The state took all of that down and stuffed it into the records on August 21st this past year, after the state pretty much laughed it out of court on July 27th. So he then tried to challenge the execution methods by used by the state. So they took that paperwork and stuffed it in the case file too. Just last week, he was set to meet with the parole board because they found something that they thought might drag everything out even longer. But he declined to meet with them. That meant that this past Monday, September 22nd, 2025, they probably laughed as they cleared his way to be flushed down the toilet like a turd he was. That left the moron with nowhere else to go on the case. Seeing what I've seen so far, I don't doubt that he's going to try something else, but I think come early morning on October 10th, these chickens are going to come home to roost, and justice for the Payne family is finally going to be served, even if it's 25 years cold. And as far as I'm concerned, it's way overdue. Anyway, I hope you got something out of our story today. It was kind of short, but it's what it needed to be told. If you did, please rate and review the podcast. Or if you're watching on YouTube, Rumble, or Spotify, throw us a like, and don't forget to subscribe, follow wherever you watch or listen. Come on over to Appalachian Murder, Mystery, or Legend Podcast on Facebook group, where we talk Appalachian or anything else you want to talk about. I'll be back real soon with another Appalachian murder mystery or legend, and I will see you then.